You check your bank account, not shocked, not even surprised, just mildly offended at this point. The number is not zero, which is great, technically, but it is also never where it is supposed to be, which feels like a very specific kind of joke. You replay the month in your head. No dramatic mistakes. No late-night spending spree you can blame on bad decisions and worse judgment. Just normal life. Groceries, a few subscriptions you barely remember signing up for, maybe a small treat here and there because apparently surviving the week deserves a reward now. And that is where it gets interesting. Nothing went wrong. So why does it feel like something is quietly leaking anyway? You try to do things right. Not perfectly, just responsibly. You are not the person buying random stuff at 3 a.m. for no reason. You compare prices. You hesitate before clicking buy. Sometimes you even close the tab and feel weirdly proud about it. You skip the obvious traps. No luxury car sitting outside your house pretending to be a good financial decision. No impulsive trips just to post pictures and recover financially for the next 6 months. From the outside, it looks like you are doing what you are supposed to do. And in your head, you kind of are. You tell yourself you are doing okay. Stable, reasonable, not amazing, but not a disaster either. Which sounds comforting, until you realize nothing is really changing. Money comes in. Bills go out. And whatever stays never seems to build into anything meaningful. It just fades away slowly, like background noise you stop noticing after a while. You do not feel reckless. If anything, you feel controlled. Careful in small ways. Disciplined even. The kind of person who should be making progress, at least a little bit. But you are not. And that is where the frustration starts to grow. Because it does not feel like you are making obvious mistakes. It feels like you are following the rules and still staying in the same place. At some point, a thought starts to creep in. Quiet, but persistent. What if it is not just you? Here is the part that does not quite add up. If you are not spending wildly, if you are not making obvious financial mistakes, then why is your money not growing? The standard advice sounds almost insulting at this point. Cut unnecessary expenses. Spend less. Be more disciplined, as if you have been casually ignoring that your entire life, but you already trimmed the obvious things, or at least you think you did. That is what makes this so frustrating. On paper, everything looks reasonable, which means the real problem is not sitting in plain sight. It is hiding in things that do not feel like decisions. Small charges that barely register. Subscriptions that renew so quietly they might as well not exist. Tiny upgrades that seem harmless in the moment. Nothing dramatic. Nothing worth stressing over individually. And that is exactly why they slip through. Because each one feels insignificant. Almost too small to care about. But together, they create something much harder to notice. A constant low-level outflow. Not big enough to trigger panic, just consistent enough to keep you stuck. It is not one bad choice. It is a pattern you never realized you were repeating. This is where things shift a bit. You are not bad with money. You are just operating inside a system that works better when you are not paying attention. Which, conveniently, is most of the time. Spending does not look like it used to. There is no real friction anymore. No moment where you stop, think, and feel the weight of the decision. It is just tap, confirm, done. Sometimes you do not even get that. It renews automatically, like your money has developed a habit of leaving without asking. And the less you feel it, the easier it is to repeat. That is not an accident. Companies are not sitting around hoping you make one big purchase. That would be risky. They would much rather you spend small amounts, consistently, without thinking twice about it. Because small feels safe. Small feels harmless. Small feels like it does not count. Until it does. So your money does not disappear in obvious chunks. It leaks. Quietly. Predictably. In ways that never demand your attention. And because nothing feels urgent, nothing gets questioned. This is not really about discipline. That is the part most people get wrong. It is about awareness. Because you cannot control what you do not notice. And right now, a lot of what is happening just below that line. So what does this actually look like in practice? There are a few very specific ways money slips away without ever feeling like a problem. And once you see them, it becomes a lot harder to ignore what is happening. The first one is recurring invisibility. Subscriptions, memberships, auto pay services. All the things you set up once and then mentally file under handled. Individually, they are small enough to feel irrelevant. A few dollars here, a few more there, nothing worth canceling, at least not today. But the real issue is not the price. It is the fact that you stop evaluating them entirely. They leave your account on schedule, without asking, without reminding you, without forcing you to reconsider if they are still worth it. And over time, they move from being a choice to just being part of your financial background. No friction means no awareness, and no awareness means no control. The second one is a bit more subtle. Emotional micro-spending. This is the money you spend for reasons that feel completely justified in the moment. You are tired, so you order food instead of cooking. You are stressed, so you buy something small to feel a bit better. You had a long day, so you tell yourself you deserve it. And to be fair, none of these decisions are irrational on their own. The problem is not the individual purchase, it is the pattern behind it. Because these moments are not random. They follow your routines, your mood, your habits, and if the pattern repeats, the spending repeats too. Quietly, consistently, and without ever feeling like a serious issue. It just becomes part of how you cope, reward, or get through the day. The third one is something most people never notice at all. Price normalization. This is where your sense of what is expensive slowly shifts over time. A small expense that used to make you hesitate now feels completely normal. Then slightly bigger ones start to feel acceptable too. Not because your income suddenly increased, but because your perception adjusted. 5 becomes 10. 10 becomes 20. And at no point does it feel like a big jump. It just feels fine. Until you realize your baseline spending has quietly expanded without any deliberate decision to increase it. And here is the uncomfortable part. None of these feel like mistakes. There is no moment where you think, that was a bad idea. No clear signal that something is going wrong. That is exactly why they are so effective at draining your money over time. They operate below your awareness. And anything happening below your awareness is very hard to control, because, from your perspective, it barely exists. Let's make this a little less abstract. Take subscriptions, for example. You sign up for one because you actually need it. Then another because it is useful. Then one more because it is cheap enough to not overthink. 9 here, 15 there. Maybe a cloud storage plan you forgot about, a streaming service you swore you would use more. Add 5 or 6 of these together, and suddenly you are losing a noticeable amount every month for things you are not actively choosing anymore. Over a year, that number quietly turns into something much less small. And the strange part is, if someone asked you about it, you would probably still describe each one as insignificant. Then there is emotional spending. A food delivery does not feel like a financial decision. It feels like survival. You are tired, you are busy, or you just do not feel like dealing with cooking. So you order something. It is not extreme. It is not reckless. It is just convenient. Now repeat that a few times a week. Individually, it still feels harmless. But over time, it adds up in a way that never feels urgent enough to question. Not because you do not care, but because each moment feels reasonable. And that is the pattern. Reasonable decisions that quietly stack. Then comes price normalization, which is probably the most invisible one of all. There was a time when a certain price would make you pause. You would think twice, maybe even walk away. Now, that same number barely registers. It feels normal, expected even. So naturally, slightly higher prices start to feel acceptable too. Not because you made a conscious decision to spend more, but because your internal scale shifted without asking for permission. And once that baseline moves, it affects dozens of small decisions every single month. None of these situations are extreme. That is the whole point. They are normal, common, easy to justify, almost boring to talk about. And yet, they are responsible for a significant portion of where your money actually goes. Not through one big mistake, but through hundreds of small ones that never looked like mistakes in the first place. The real cost of all this is not just the money, it is the illusion it creates. Because when money disappears slowly, nothing ever feels broken enough to fix. There is no moment where you stop and think, this is a problem. No crisis, no dramatic wake-up call, just a constant feeling that you are close. Close to saving more. Close to investing. Close to finally getting ahead. But never quite there. And that almost is dangerous. Not because it hurts, but because it does not hurt enough. It keeps you in a passive state where you assume things will improve. Eventually. Maybe next month. Maybe when you are a bit more disciplined. Maybe when something changes. Meanwhile, nothing actually changes. Over time, this starts shaping how you see yourself. Not in a dramatic way. You do not suddenly decide you are bad with money. It is more subtle than that. You just begin to accept that progress is slower for you. That building anything meaningful financially is harder than it should be. So you adjust your expectations. You aim a little lower. You stop questioning certain patterns. You tolerate things that, if you saw them clearly, you would probably fix. And that is the real trap. Not the spending itself, but the lack of clarity around it. Because when you cannot clearly see the problem, you cannot clearly solve it. So the cycle continues, quietly, consistently, without ever demanding your full attention, which ironically is exactly why it works so well. So here is the part that actually matters. You are not broke. If you were, this would be obvious, painfully obvious. You would not need a video to explain it. You would already know exactly where things went wrong. That is not your situation. You are leaking. And leaks are much harder to notice because they do not demand attention. They just quietly exist in the background, doing their job while you focus on everything else. Which means the solution is not dramatic. It is not about cutting everything you enjoy and pretending you will suddenly love a life of pure financial discipline. That usually lasts about a week before reality steps in. It is about visibility. Seeing where your money goes when you are not actively deciding. Not guessing, not estimating. Actually seeing it. Because once something becomes visible, it stops being automatic. It becomes a choice again. And that is the shift most people never make. From passive loss to active control. Not by doing more, not by working harder, but by finally noticing what was always there, quietly shaping your results. Nothing magical, just awareness, applied consistently. And surprisingly, that is usually enough. If this made you look at your spending a little differently, then it is probably worth checking your last 30 days with fresh eyes. Not to judge it, just to actually see it. Because there are usually a few patterns hiding there, waiting to be noticed. And if you want to keep uncovering how money really behaves behind the scenes, like this video, share it with someone who is also doing everything right, but still wondering where things are slipping. And subscribe, because there is a lot more going on here than it seems at first glance.